All right, I think we're live. So hi everyone. So Alexi and I are back with our HR Unscripted series, episode 2. We have with us Eveliene from Singapore. Eveliene is a highly regarded HR leader in the area, especially. She was featured in the HRD 2023's list of Asia's most influential leaders, and she brings with her a wealth of experience of navigating and integrating diverse cultures. I'm sure we will go into it in depth here. And I think today, more than any other time, when people are looking to be working remotely from different locations, and everyone is so dispersed. Um, I think this topic of like bringing people together from all these different cultures, and making a really strong and high functioning organization is most relevant. And this is where Evelyn's experience has been exceptional. She's worked across Singapore, Hong Kong, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, US, China, and the Netherlands. So that's a lot. And I'm sure, Evelyn, you can tell us more about your experience in detail. And then we can dive in straight into the topic for today, which is how to run a successful and diverse work culture globally. So, Evelyn, over to you. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me in your second series live here. It's a true honor, and I really sincerely appreciate that you guys reached out and approached me for this second series. Yes, I've been into the obviously the HR field for a long time, and I've landed in Singapore about 6 years ago, and that really allowed me to see much more, even despite like having done previous work international, which was mostly between US and Europe. To add on, the Asian landscape is very different from Europe and US. So I can't be more grateful, obviously, to having the exposure and opportunity to be here now in Singapore and add that on to all of the work and helping organizations to thrive, to grow, to go through change management or restructuring and all of that. And even more, if we're looking back at the past years, obviously navigating through COVID and now really looking into AI and so many changes and so fast that we are looking at for companies, whether you're mid-sized or small, just starting out. There's a lot to cope with, and then imagine if you're thinking about maybe at some point you want to scale. So if we're thinking back at how to run like a successful company, creating a really good company culture, these things sometimes they're kind of like it's a very easy way of, yes, we want to go for certain goals and we have our mission, and a lot of things that I'm seeing a lot happening or have seen in the past is that there are so many different approaches, depending on the struggles, the goals, the business plan, the mission, the values that you want to thrive and go for. But let's start taking a step back and by, for example, saying that no company, whether it's successful or not, is a one-man show.
Yeah. Right.
And that from leading a company with so many people, as you grow and step into different challenges, it's so important to keep that in mind. It's so simple to say it's not a one-man show. As soon as you register your company, yes, it's a one-man show. But thereafter, as you start hiring your people, you focus on your operations. From there, it is so critical that we keep in mind, and obviously specifically from like a people or HR function, that we're dealing with people, and people are really the cornerstones of your organization, of your success. And it doesn't mean we are living in an environment where everything goes or is about success and reaching our goals and reaching our KPIs. And sometimes it's better that we reflect back. And that's, if we're looking at like a one-man show, it also comes down to how we structure our organization internally, how we manage our people, how we make sure we stay aligned. We're staying close to our people. We're staying close to our goals at the same time. We're creating an environment wherein the organization succeeds, but the people as well. People are happy. People are engaged. People are really being part of the journey. And if you're looking at like different challenges like we face in life ourselves, like you don't want to be in a situation where you feel like you're completely alone while you have to face difficult or make difficult choices, or you go through challenges in life. It's the same with an organization. So sometimes we are, as human beings or making decisions, what I often see happening is that you can have all of these things and principles in mind, but then still it's very human sometimes that we tend to overthink, or we sometimes tend to go too fast. And when we go too fast, that can create or lead to making wrong decisions. So finding a balance in between, not like overthinking too much, but also don't go to go too easy or too quick. That's kind of like the balance, the mid through kind of where you're looking at.
Especially when you're talking about these principles across geographies, especially when we talk about US and Europe and the concepts of independence and autonomy and giving people power, versus when you start getting to, let's say, China, or like in Beijing, you had some experiences of integrating culture. There, the cultural notations might be different, right? I'm sure the underlying principles are still the same at a human level. So how did you tackle some of that, like with especially, moving and getting the workforce integrated from China, and then the Western civilization? Like, how did that work for you?
Right. So that's a really good and quite a very interesting approach and opportunity I had with Glue Up. So what I could have done when I've joined the team, I could have started for our growing plans, because the company we wanted to expand, we wanted to become a global company. We had our core product, our operations in China. We had our teams across different locations in China. And the business plan was to grow in quite a short period of time, expanding the operation. So I could have stepped in there and said, I'm sitting in Singapore, we're gonna roll out these policies and these tools, and those will be a great foundation to hire people, to get operations up to speed in these other new countries, like new cultures, new ways of work. But it wouldn't have worked in a way where I would, in this way, have taken the quick, easy direction. Instead, what I decided to do was to travel a few times to the teams in Beijing. And yes, it was a bit more time consuming, but I had the opportunity to sit down with each of the department heads there. And I knew obviously the vision, the direction where we wanted to go towards and what was roughly needed. But what I wanted to understand first is, what is the current landscape we are on right now? How do we operate? What are the teams focusing on? What are their pain points? And how is their way of working? Because if I want to come around the corner in a couple months and say, we're going to do it 360 or 180 different, it would not work out well, because it will be so different from how they do their day-to-day work, what they're used to, maybe even don't have the competencies or the skills. So it took a little bit of time for me to obviously get to know the team and understand their way of work, how they run their operations, department by department. But by doing so, by really basically tuning into the actual company landscape before stepping into how we're going to scale and how we're going to reach all of that, and bringing new cultures and new teams and increase our way of work and operations. It's such an important point. And I think a lot of what I've seen in the past with a lot of organizations is that sometimes they go too fast and they forget to first look internally. Like, what are
integration?
Right. And Eveliene, these all process that you follow, right? And I found really interesting. How did it influence the other decisions you had to take with regards to the, let's say, global expansion later on, right? Because you had these foundations, this knowledge of how things were working, how the culture was working there. How did it influence the other decisions that you had to take to, to respect maybe that culture, or to integrate that culture into
Yeah.
the global workforce that you were creating in the same time?
It's important whether, like, what type of change or challenge you're facing, to first understand your internal pain points
Yeah,
before you're going to continue to either fix that, or you first fix it and build,
yeah,
or you try to manage these two together. But without doing one of these steps, you can't really continue to build from there. You're gonna fall. It's gonna fall apart at some point.
yeah,
Yeah.
So by being there with these people, understanding the operations, their way of work, and obviously they had an idea. They knew that the company wanted to grow and scale up, and that would expose them to different ways of works, different cultures. But by not sitting down with them and understanding their ways of work,
Yeah.
and explaining as a team, because again we're a team, how we should make changes together,
Yeah.
and not by one person on the top or in the executive team
sure.
deciding what needs to be done and just rolling it out. You're integrating your internal stakeholders
Yeah,
as part of the overall process. That doesn't mean that they need to make decisions about it, but because you engage with them and you make them part of this transitional process, they feel very much engaged. And the moment is there that you're going to roll out changes, whether it's new tools or ways of works, they are much more prepared and willing to stay or step on board throughout this change. So I think that internal review, like look at your internal landscape,
Yeah.
talk to department heads to really understand what is happening before you're going to make like larger decisions on what needs to be done to create that bigger picture, or to get to
And
that bigger picture.
were there some of these insights, especially when you went to Beijing and you understood the culture and you sat down? Like some of these, were these like completely novel or unintuitive things?
Yeah.
Do you have any examples, if you can share any?
Yes. Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
like let's give one example from like an internal way of work when it comes to HR. Then, because I've been sitting down with each of the departments and department heads, and people appreciate that as well. When you do that, they appreciate that you take the time to really understand how they do the work and what their perception of it is. So again, it all comes together later. But I remember, with full respect, one of my colleagues in the HR team in China had a very old-fashioned way of creating meetings.
Okay.
It was not digitalized at all, and obviously, to grow to scale, we had to make quite some changes on the processes, doing much more digital. So when I've explained and I've asked him why are you doing it a certain way, and how can we improve it in order to be prepared for a global scale
Yeah.
or new way of work, he completely understood. But if I haven't had done it that way, by asking him first, why is it you do it this way, and how do you think we can improve, we would have never reached the end of the
Right. There
whole
will be
change.
lots of friction towards and like resistance to change because
Yeah.
they would have felt maybe not understood, and that you're coming and disrupting some of their activity. So can I ask, was this a digital product or was it a more physical product, this company?
It's a SaaS product, so
It was
completely digital. Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it was very surprising, but again, because it's a very different work culture, with all respect, like everyone has their own way of work.
Yeah.
It does take a little bit more time, and then on top of that, right now we also have to deal with such a mango and mix of different generations on the work floor.
Yeah,
So
that's also true.
on top of that, like, it's so important to keep all of these tiny yet very important things in mind when you go through change or challenges, or you need to restructure.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always have to be like an HR person. It's specifically relevant for department heads when you are having all of your teams under you and you get together during executive during executive meetings.
Yeah.
So I have a question. This has been something that's been on my mind. Like, so I worked at Expedia, which is like an incredibly diverse, multiple locations,
Yeah.
and we always struggled with like a good formula for smaller teams. So there's one philosophy of like even the smallest unit can be geographically dispersed, right? So for example, in one team that I was at, like we had 9 people in a team and 4 time zones, right? So, and I think
Right.
4 time zones and different cultures. And there are benefits to it where it's just like you can hand things over between the team members, so you almost work 24 hours. um,
Mm.
the other challenge then is the cultural differences, or like the way it just being geographically is dispersed, so you don't get that like camaraderie of being in the same space. There's no water cooler movements. So in your experience, um, have you found one better than the other in terms of like when you have multiple locations working together? Is there
Mm.
a is there one way which works better than the others?
Well, I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience. So first of all, so I think there are like so many different perspectives on what works well for one organization versus another. But what I tend to see and feel works very well, and even more obviously after the whole pandemic, is that we are rethinking our way of work and we want to make it more hybrid, um, more remote. Which obviously is beneficial for both employees and the company, as you want to give more flexibility on how work can be done or needs to be done, as well as to make sure people have a correct or a right work-life balance, can stay high in their productivity, innovation. So I'm quite happy to see that direction, that shift came very fast throughout and after the pandemic.
Yeah.
If we would have still like navigated more through like a traditional way of work where, and there's still a lot of companies doing that with all respect, and if it works for them, it works for them. But to my opinion, if you have a global workforce, and you need to be flexible to move around different time zones or get your deadlines or things delivered, it's very, very good to have a more flexible approach like hybrid or remote.
And
It's interesting for the teams as well, because a lot of specifically like the younger generations these days, they love to thrive and develop themselves in international environments, learn a lot, soak a lot of information in. So, and obviously at some point you can look at opportunities for them to meet with teams in other countries if there's budgets for. So yeah, there's so much to thrive on or to win from both ends.
Yeah, I agree, and I think personally it's very rewarding to work across so many different cultures.
yeah,
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Eveliene, we you know, if we talk about like let's say building, and you were talking about remote, and you know, it's true that this is the reality of a lot of companies now working remote, with like through different countries, different cultures again. When we prepared the call, we talked about a few different concepts that really caught my attention. And I feel like those are really key ingredients in building like successful business, in integrating, you know, companies into like different cultures. Talking about transparency, open communications, equality. Can you comment a little bit on those and how those concepts, how do you integrate those concepts into your day-to-day work as a HR to, again, make your organization successful?
Right. So I think like if you're looking at like an international company or a company that wants to scale, like again, the landscape is critical. So as you hire more and more people, you need to make sure there is there's like enough support material or tools available to enable to connect with your teams. But aside from like your day-to-day operations, that things will run, and you have your department heads and teams will do their day-to-day operations. It is very important, and I think that works very well in a flexible way of working, whether it's fully remote or hybrid. To have and to keep an eye or focus on clear communication and transparency. Like every organization where everyone is going through change and challenges, and we have peaks, we have downs, we learn along the way. But it is like, without having an environment where there's no clear communication, it's so important, because even with a smaller team across one region, imagine when you have teams across multiple regions, people need to be aware or included in what's happening within the business. So whether you have town halls once in a while, but creating an environment where people understand what's happening, while there is at the same time transparency. Where as a leader or multiple leaders within the company are able to explain and to show what's actually happening, the direction we're going to, the changes we need to make. If you are not doing that too regular, obviously communication will flow in different directions. It's just not. It's so important for your employee engagement. Again, for retention as well. For innovation, it all again comes together why you would make a decision, looking at bigger pictures, where you want to go towards to, or where you want to grow towards to, by making sure you're taking care of your internal landscape, your people, that there's clear communication through everyone, whether that is to all employees in one time or through department heads, that there is synergy and alignment on the direction where you need to go to. And it doesn't mean that it's always obviously good news. There's also times where we need to go. But if you are missing that, you're basically going to go down in your overall engagement, your productivity. You're basically pushing your people away. And that's just a shame, because it's something we should always keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Whether it's where you're going smaller, whether it's you're going to grow, whether you have to do a complete restructure. That's why these alignments on, like, from top to down, like your executive team down to departments, is so important.
Speaking of engagement, I think how would you rate the way we do engagement today, which is like employee surveys and getting employee NPS? I mean, that's one strategy. Like, are there other strategies, or is that a better way?
Yeah, I thought about it as well. It's interesting. If you're creating an environment where everyone is, it's maybe not easy. Every company goes through challenges, but you're creating an open environment in which everyone understands, everyone is doing their best, everyone tries to deliver and thrive. It's much more likely for an organization, company, that an employee would feel secure enough to go to their supervisor and say, hey, I would like to see if we can get some budget for individual growth or learning and development, or there's much more ability for an employee to open up, and it can give you much more detailed informations or actual informations, rather than rolling out a poll. Doesn't mean polls are not relevant. We still have to do surveys or polls. But ideally, you want to have an environment in which employees come to their supervisors, they're feeling supported, secure, in a way that they feel they can open up, like opening up, telling, I would love to see if we can do this, or can I make a suggestion for a new implementation, or a complete new change. That is the ideal situation, or the ideal environment what you want to create. And you can't create that in an overly structured organization, to my opinion, because it's just too complex, and lines are not flowing through naturally. There are not that many direct lines. It takes forever to make a change.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like organizations think like, oh, we are so overstructured right now, we can't make a change anymore. That's not true. But then again, come down to your executive team, your department heads, your people. If you need to make these changes, include them in the process. That doesn't mean, again, like let them make the final decisions, but at least include them. If you want to go towards a change and you engage with your people up front, it's much more likely to roll it out more successful when you have to make certain changes. It's the same with surveys and relevant information. Like you want employees to go to their supervisor and say, hey, I'm really not happy with this. This really sucks. Or, we had this town hall last night. What's going to happen? It's not clear.
Yeah.
So I think my last question. This has been incredible, and I love this conversation. I could talk for hours on this with you, Eveliene. But I think as a business leader, sometimes I get the sense that it's hard for a business leader who are maybe, let's say, 4 or 5 steps removed from the grassroots to get a temperature check on the culture, right? Because if you only hear good things, you don't know if it is real or not. So what would be your advice to a business leader who is probably removed from the lowest levels? Like, how can they get a good temperature check on the culture and like they are doing the right things?
Making sure you engage truly with your executive team, or at least the department heads if they're part of your executive team. They should do their proper people management work, know what's going on in their function or in their team.
Right.
And make sure that there is a good, again, transparency and alignment across these functions within the executive team. If you have to follow up with your final decision maker, CEO, or when it comes to more radical changes. But of course, HR also plays a very, very important role in that. So it's a combination of department heads as well as HR. Sometimes, like some organizations, they tend to not always include, with all respect, HR people within their final strategic decision making, which is just a miss. It's really, really a miss.
Involve more of your HR teams, and as a business leader, be more engaged with skip levels or even like upper levels, so you're aware that there's no conflicts of opinions and things like that. Is that what you?
Yeah, I mean, like HR is there, like we are there to navigate between the business and the people. We're literally in that middle spot. Like one direction for us goes towards successful business and the other one goes towards our people.
Yeah.
And then around that, on the other side of the circle, you have your departments and department heads. That needs to flow together.
And I think that's what makes like a HR successful, the ability to understand the business and have like some business acumen, and also being able to be people oriented and making sure your people are taken care of. Awesome. Cool. Look, Eveliene, we always have like what we call our signature question to close the session. So I have for you today. What have you learned this year?
I've learned to embrace change in a better way. Embrace change as an opportunity to learn, to grow. And I've just read something very beautiful this morning, which I wanted to share, which basically connects with embracing change, seeing it as an opportunity for growth and or development, rather than the other way. It says the following: the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes.
Oh, wow.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful, right?
Yeah, that's really nice.
And it really resonates. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Cool. the second one that we have for you is, if you could travel back 5 years, what advice would you give to yourself?
I would definitely say just keep taking one step at a time. One
Mhm.
step at a time is fast enough. It's good enough. You don't have to take always 2 or 3 steps at the same time.
Yeah.
Despite the pressure or multiple things that you're dealing with or have to pick up, one step is enough. You'll get there. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's better we take one step at a time, and we want to make sure it's the right step
Oh, for
at
sure.
that point of time, instead of going too fast and we have to start all over again.
Yeah, 100%. I think
Completely.
it's the same when you try to learn things, right? Try not to learn everything in the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To
true.
learning and development in HR.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for me, it's very natural since I've been handling so many different things. For me, it's very natural to sometimes wanting to do a lot of things at the same time, and I've really had to learn myself
Yeah,
to take a step back and just do it a little bit more slowly, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. And I think, in fact, that is the steadiest and more surest progress. Like, I completely agree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right, that was amazing, Evelyn. Like I said, I could talk for hours with you.
same
But,
here.
yeah, it was such a pleasure to have you here, and we absolutely everyone can see why you have been named one of the most influential leaders in Asia, or perhaps even the world. Um, so thanks again for your time, and we will have our next session in August. We
Yeah.
will share the details soon for our next guest. But in the meantime, if you have any questions for Evelyne, please feel free to send them directly to us, add it as a comment, or to Evelyne. And we'll share this video separately as a recording and some snippets for everyone. So thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Evelyne, for joining.
Thank you, Evelyn.
We'll
Thank
sign
you
up.
for having me.
It's
It
a
was
pleasure.
it was really great. Like we can talk for hours. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, guys.
We'll take
Appreciate
it
it.
offline. We'll continue the conversation.
Yes.
All right. Thank
Thank you
you,
so
everyone.
much. Have a good
Bye.
day. Bye.